like to begin this morning by thanking Liz Gould and Paul Fitzgerald for being the ones who really made this program possible. Liz and Paul are former discussion leaders who led a circle discussion on Afghanistan more than 20 years ago. That was in 1981, just after they had returned from Afghanistan as the first American journalists allowed to enter the country behind Soviet lines. Their commitment to educating the public on Afghanistan hasn't wavered since that time, and we are so very pleased and grateful that they brought our discussion leader today, Sima Wali, to our attention, as well as their own current work on the documentary of her story. And I'd like to ask Paul and Liz to stand up and be recognized. I want to say how fortunate we feel to have WBZ-TV Channel 4's most prominent and our favorite anchor, Liz Walker, here with us this morning to moderate. I'd like to introduce to you our discussion leader this morning, Sima Wali. As President of Refugee Women in Development, Sima Wali has worked for more than 22 years to empower women who are affected by major socio-political transformations such as war, civil strife, and human rights abuses. Sima's organization, Refugee Women in Development, or REFWID, is an international nonprofit organization established in 1981. Sima has received the Amnesty International Janetta Sagan Human Rights Award for her work on behalf of Afghan women and children, and the Gloria Steinem Women of Vision Award. In 2002, she was invited as the only woman from the United States to serve as a delegate to the Bonn peace talks, which brought about the establishment of the Karzai government, and where through her advocacy, a ministry dedicated solely to the needs of women, the Ministry of Women's Affairs, was created. Headquartered in Washington, D.C., Sima now operates the only office of a non-governmental organization in Kabul with a presence at that ministry. As an advocate and human rights practitioner, Sima's life has frequently been threatened for exposing the realities of the Afghan crisis. But Sima did not back down, knowing that the Afghan people were putting their lives on the line every day. And now I'd like to welcome Sima Wali and invite her to come up to the podium to introduce the film clip for the documentary, The Woman in Exile Returns, the Sima Wali story.
Thank you to you for that humbling introduction. I wish to thank the New England Circle, the Dunphy family, Liz Walker, and the organizers of this event for inviting me this morning to call attention to the continuing humanitarian and political crisis in Afghanistan. My name is Sima Wali, and I'm the President of Refugee Women in Development. As a product of the Afghan war, I'm too familiar with life-altering crisis. At the time I fled Afghanistan, after the 1978 Marxist coup, my family was placed under house arrest simply because, as allies to the West, we belonged on the wrong side of Afghan politics. I left behind a culture striving on the path of democracy and giving a voice to women. I was accustomed to visibility and contributions of women. I was exposed to empowered women both in my own immediate family and the larger society, who held cabinet posts, worked alongside men in government. I still grieve for the Afghanistan I left behind and the lost opportunities for the democratic-minded Afghan people. During the past 23 years, I made a promise to myself and to my people that I would help them rebuild democratic institutions. I promised my people that I would help keep them and their voices and their struggle alive. But until the downfall of the Taliban, REFWID, my organization, was unable to conduct its programs inside Afghanistan. Now, with an office in Kabul, I am finally able to fulfill my promise. But the promise of bringing democracy and human rights to Afghan women and men continues to face serious obstacles. What the world has seen of Afghanistan in the last decades is not the Afghanistan of my father or mother. It is not the Afghanistan of tolerance and beauty that I knew as a young woman. In fact, the Afghanistan that grew from the ruins of the war against Russia was not an Afghanistan of this world at all. The Taliban's draconian edicts represented an entirely new form of organized violence against women. Termed gender apartheid, the moral, spiritual, and human crisis provoked by this unique form of cruelty galvanized the world's women for the first time to the idea that even the most basic of human rights can be lost. But in that lesson, for the women of the world, Afghan women were the canaries in the mine shaft, warning that an ever greater danger was fast approaching. Today, Afghanistan is still not free from such radical ideas. Hijacked by foreign extremists, our traditions and our religion have been twisted against us, while the media has often failed to recognize the Afghan people were themselves hostages in their own land. For the duration of the Taliban rule that enslaved Afghan women, I carried their pleading voices and their screams while the world looked the other way. Now I must plead for the world to look at us again and see what we all will become unless a new will and determination to establish democracy can be found. International law and diplomacy broke down in Afghanistan. That system and the spiritual values that supported it must now be restored to end the mass human tragedy. Afghanistan lost 2 million people for siding with the US in the war to bring an end to communism. We deserve better. Now that we have a semblance of a new government and a new society, the Afghan people are again apprehensive. Although 9/11 was a wake-up call that US security relies on a stable Afghanistan, I fear that we will be abandoned once again. Today, while strides have been made to bring women along in reconstruction schemes, these advances are tempered with lack of security, rampant poverty, unemployment, violence against women, and the lack of basic amenities. The common Afghan man and women have fear in their hearts and uncertainty about their future. Although some gains have been achieved in removing a repressive regime, women remain at risk, and I remain highly concerned about the Taliban mentality in ruling circles. And as an Afghan and an American, I will testify to you that the argument against women's rights is neither Afghan nor Islamic. The world community must not acquiesce with rhetoric. We who are concerned about the fate of our Afghan sisters must challenge developments in Afghanistan. What Afghanistan and its women desperately need as they emerge from a protracted war and an anguished history of intervention is not misplaced charity, but long-term strategies for sustainable democracy. How we achieve that is what I have spent 25 years of my life doing as President of Refugee Women in Development. I will end my brief remarks here, and I'd be happy to take questions. But now I would like us to see a clip from Paul Fitzgerald and Liz Gu's film about my return to Kabul for the first time since 1978. I would also like to take this opportunity for thanking them both for traveling with me and spending their time on a pro bono basis and being such wonderful allies to support my work on behalf of Afghan women and help me telling the truth and revealing the realities of the Afghan people. So thank you both. Thank you.
It's 5 a.m. at Dubai International Airport, and the motley crowd of businessmen, journalists, and humanitarian aid workers gathers at the snack bar. The mood is friendly and pleasant for so early in the morning. Old friends joke and laugh. And as the local mullah leads the call to prayer outside, a strange pilgrimage begins within. One person who's been waiting a lifetime for this moment is Sima Wali. Having escaped death during the 1978 Marxist coup, she managed to flee for her life as family and friends succumbed to execution, torture, and imprisonment. Now, after 24 years, Sima is returning to Kabul, only this time to face the new and even more challenging step of helping to rebuild her shattered nation. Accompanied by close friends Liz Gould, Paul Fitzgerald, and Michelle Andina, it's an adventure she both relishes and fears.
This was meant to be. I told you this.
I'm hopeful, I am apprehensive, and I know I'll be devastated by the destruction that I have been trying to be in denial, I suppose, and I know it will hit me very hard, but I'm also hopeful that I will be able to help those that are returning back to Afghanistan, especially the women who are trying to rebuild the devastated country and really rebuild the lives of the Afghan people.
Memories flood back as Sima glimpses her homeland again. But as the plane nears Kabul, the stark reality of what was once a vibrant city comes home. As president and founder of the Washington, D.C.-based Refugee Women in Development, REFWID, Sima has worked tirelessly for the human rights of Afghanistan's women, and for over 20 years has been a strong and consistent voice for democratic and moderate-minded Afghans.
Sima Wali has been named the 1999 recipient of Amnesty International's Janetta Sagan Award for the Human Rights of Women.
And in 2001 was selected as one of the 3 women delegates to the UN-sponsored peace talks.
My name is Sima Wali, and I'm the President of Refugee Women in Development.
It's like you're, without the tragedy, you're the Joan of Arc of Afghanistan.
Having run programs for Afghan NGOs in Pakistan during Taliban control, Sima's return to Kabul is a major step in establishing REFWID inside Afghanistan, where she will emphasize capacity building and the empowerment of the local non-governmental organizations. But the ruined state of the city remains a problem that must be overcome. After years of drought, water is at a premium, while electric service remains spotty at best. With 75% of the city destroyed in the war, available space is nearly non-existent, and what little there is must be restored after years of abuse. The pain suffered by the people of Kabul surrounds you as you travel the city, and Sima translated as our driver remembered the long and terrible war, as if it were just yesterday.
He was showing us his home, and he said he had undergone some serious traumatic events. I mean, when Gulbuddin was shelling the city about 7-8 years ago, they actually had...
At a French-run center called Aina, which means mirror in Dari, Sima negotiates for one of the few usable function halls. But the chances are slim. A former Taliban prison, the entire compound faces an extensive restoration process. And as only one of a handful of facilities, the pleasant surroundings are in constant demand. No less in demand are the local non-governmental organizations, the so-called NGOs, that Sima has come to assist. Born out of a desperate need during the war, organizations like the Afghan Institute for Learning, AIL, provide training and educational services to the community that the newly formed Afghan government has yet to fund. Operating from Pakistan during Taliban rule, Sakina Yaqubi and her staff now struggle to keep up with the growing demand in Kabul. But Sima fears that the success of the local non-governmental organizations now operating in Afghanistan may be undermined by forces far beyond her classrooms.
There is this notion that there is no need for local community-based groups to do education and do training and informal education, that the government must handle everything.
One night I was putting my head on the pillow. I was thinking, oh my God, what will happen? What is this? And the next morning I said, no, we have to keep doing. We can't stop and back up, because that is we are here for. And if we really want to be effective, we have to face a lot of problems. That is it. It's not going to be easy. People are just coming every day. Yesterday, Khadijan told me that there is 7 other students who want to register for preschool. And it's just, we are jammed. We don't have enough space.
At the Women's Organization for a Mutual Afghan Network, Sima finds expatriate Mina Sherzoy attempting to bring modern systems analysis to the deeply ingrained problems of employment in the Afghan economy.
How am I going to create something or do something for these people that's going to be long-term effective, not short-term?
And what we want to do is select maybe 4 or 5 women NGOs that will be part of the training process, and then get the ones that are most, select the ones that are most legitimate to then work directly with the women-headed households. We give them tiny grants of $200 each.
Wonderful.
And on the basis of that, we want that NGO, women's NGO, to be monitoring.
Despite the war and the destruction, Kabul is teeming with life. But the influx of thousands of refugees makes the mission of finding those who can benefit most from Sima's training that much more urgent. It's a time-consuming and exhaustive process. But by constantly rearranging her schedule to accommodate the growing list of NGOs, Sima's program is quickly beginning to gel.
Talk with you more, first to meet with you, to learn more about the ministry and its staff.
At the Ministry of Women's Affairs, Sima meets with prospective participants and over the sounds of hammers and saws explains the details of what she has come 5,000 miles to teach. Still under construction after suffering heavy bomb damage during the war, it's hoped this ministry will become the nerve center for a whole new era of Afghan women's rights. And the women waste no time in articulating their specific needs. Shafika Habibi, a pioneer for women's rights and Afghan television's first anchorwoman, joins the dialogue on this first day to encourage the women to participate. But over lunch, Shafika admits the uphill struggle for human rights in post-Taliban Afghanistan has just begun.
And she herself sits on a committee to influence the media, and she requested that at least 4 prominent women who were previously active in these sectors be allowed to represent themselves, and the committee and the group that was overseen by the warlords and the extremists basically said, no, that is not possible.
But despite the latest wave of repressive restrictions by the new Afghan government, the process of bringing women of Afghanistan into the 21st century is well underway. At the Afghan Women's Welfare Department, Sima's heart swells at the sights and sounds of the new Afghanistan.
I think this is fabulous. I mean, this is why I do this work. I come to Kabul after 23 years and I see my Afghan sisters sitting behind the computer, and it renews my hope, and it's very inspiring to me. That I was just talking to them and they were telling me that they come from very far distances and they're very clear about their goals, that they want to learn computers.
But the stark realities of what must be done to rebuild Afghanistan are everywhere. And in addition to narrowing down the candidates for her workshop, Sima must also assess the basic needs for the rebuilding of an entire Afghan infrastructure ruined by 2 decades of war. These needs are no more apparent than at the Alauddin orphanage, where Sima encounters a woman begging to have her daughters admitted to an overcrowded facility where 800 children survive on a meager diet without shoes, running water, or electricity. Sima negotiates on behalf of the woman. But with the facility already operating at twice its capacity, there's little she can do but offer compensation and hope the beleaguered staff will make good on its promise to admit the girls within 2 weeks' time. Scenes like this are common in Afghanistan today, where the traditional social structure has collapsed. And as Sima tours the orphanage, she struggles to balance the needs of the children against the unpleasant realities of the situation.
And this guy was saying, well, if you give us the money, we'll buy meat for them, because they don't have meat here. The kids never get to eat protein. We will buy it for them. How do I know that this will be done?
After 24 years of war, the issues facing this country are staggering. But the crushing impact on the women, children, and culture of Afghanistan is nearly incomprehensible.
I needed to see this because what I'm doing, trying to help those that are trying to help rebuild Afghanistan, but I cannot forget this. And I needed to accept the reality of my country. It's not just what I see, the positivity. The people have a lot of hope, and we are trying to rebuild. But we also have this destruction, and it's our responsibility to build from here.
For the next few hours, Sima tours the ravaged landscape of her home city. The vanished gardens of the Darul Aman Palace, where she used to picnic with family and friends, and where Russian special forces parachuted on the night of December 27th, 1979. The world-famous Kabul Museum, where the brilliance of 5,000 years of Afghan history was dynamited into dust by the Taliban. 2 people were killed because they wouldn't tell the Taliban where this head was.
Yeah.
But even more tragic than the ruined palaces and the gutted remains are the unfulfilled promises made to the Afghan people following the defeat of the Taliban. With the arrival of the international community following the war, hope exploded throughout the country. But now, even the streets of Kabul seem less secure. And though the smiling faces of European soldiers maintain an illusion of safety, it's not the way Sima remembers the Kabul streets or the Afghanistan that she was forced to flee.
All of this, the entire block, my aunt used to own it. There were beautiful a restaurant up on top there, and then there were stores, and they had their own apartments that they used to live in. Here, this was a huge compound, and it was absolutely beautiful. They had absolutely beautiful dogs, and we used to spend a lot of time, especially high tea was an important social event where we would spend a lot of time with the family there. And I think that's a relative of mine right there. I'm not sure. Let me ask. Oh my God.
So I just got here, and I went upstairs to check the apartment. I just opened the window, and I couldn't imagine. I opened the window, and I see somebody looks like Sima, and I just called her name, and I was kind of scared. Maybe it's not Sima. Someone say, how come you're, yelling at a lady down? The other person said, "Are you sure that is your cousin?" I said, yeah, she looks like exactly my cousin. And this is like a dream.
A
dream come true, really.
Well, maybe it's meant.
It meant to be.
More faces reappear, recalling wonderful memories that give Sima strength and hope that her Afghanistan is still alive.
Remember an old guard. He was very sweet. He used to guard the front door when we'd come in, and I can't believe it. He's still here, and she's been here 40 years. I used to see her in the hallways. بابا جان سلام. خوب هستین؟ چطور هستین؟ تشکر. خوب هستین؟ زنده باشید. ما اینا همراه ما هستن.
Ethnicity, women's rights, poverty, lack of education, lack of employment, and warlordism are just some of the issues impeding the reconstruction of Afghan society. But as Sima continues to search for candidates, she's repeatedly impressed by the grassroots efforts that have held Afghan society together against overwhelming odds.
I learned English in a bad situation, in Taliban situation. In Taliban regime, I started to learn English, and on that time it was so difficult for us to learn English, and we learned English by a special teacher that he came to our house, and we learned English.
He was a man?
He was a man?
Yeah, he was a man, and he was so afraid that if the Taliban had known about our studying, they would, dot. Yes. Yes.
Sheltered in a mud-walled adobe fort near the airport, Sima discovers a locally run NGO at the Educational Training Center for the Poor Women and Girls of Afghanistan, whose capable management would put a major corporation to shame, providing services and job training to the local community under harsh Taliban rule with absolutely no outside funding or support.
And we need, as REFUG, to make sure that a group like this is recognized in the Western world and among the donors. They're doing excellent work, and they're actually supported in the community, and their services are based on community needs.
Although the promised international aid has failed to materialize, the self-determination of individual Afghans like Sima to quickly re-establish Afghan culture can already be felt on Kabul streets.
Yeah, if you look at the people, they're all everywhere working very hard, rebuilding everything. That's very good.
Returning from exile, Abdullah Sherzoi shares a sense of obligation and hope for the rebuilding by conducting classes for the local Shushan boys on the front steps of his hotel.
Some of the kids here in front of this hotel
their fathers have passed away, so they become the source of income at a very early age. So they have to go to work.
But no matter how bright or enthusiastic, or how dedicated the efforts by men like Abdullah, the future for Jahed and an entire generation of Afghan women and children rests on the success of the local NGOs. But without funding and outside support, the chances of rebuilding Afghan civil society are bleak.
Sound mind is in a sound body.
Prior to the Marxist coup that put Afghanistan at ground zero in the Cold War and drove Sima from her country, Afghanistan had experienced a slow but steady progress towards power sharing and democratization. Women's rights, including the right to vote, had been granted in the 1920s, and though rural villages maintained traditional customs, Afghanistan's cities witnessed a rapid growth that fueled demands for modernization and broad social change. The extremism fostered by the war against the Soviets was as much a war against this social change as it was against the communist state apparatus. And as the war ground down the countryside, 100 years of progressive reforms went with it. Now Afghanistan must be taken back to the basics, but for many in the West who know only of the war against the Russians, conveying a complete picture of the Afghanistan that was lost is a frustrating exercise. In appreciation of Sima's hard work, the French-run multicultural center INA comes through with the desperately needed facility to make the workshop happen. So Herr Stoiber, a veteran educator, joins the team to conduct the classes.
Conceptualizing your idea takes time and thinking. In this class, all of you, each organization, will submit a proposal.
For Sima, her second week in Kabul is a validation of her skill and hard work. But there are still those who would keep her from restoring the rights and freedoms of her Afghanistan to the Afghanistan of the 21st century.
What did you think when you saw Kabul for the first time?
I was devastated. Although I had been in touch with Afghans, many who had been back and who were giving me eyewitness reports, I still have not come to terms with the level of destruction in Kabul. This has been the most difficult trip of my life, returning, seeing home so destroyed and so destructed, and seeing the Afghan people driven so much into poverty and so traumatized. I also know that I am inspired that the Afghan spirit is indomitable, and especially the women have done so much in the face of such repression and such trauma and poverty. And I think that's where, and I know that that's my role and my responsibilities to help build up from the ashes of when it's this cadre of the civil society who are democratic-minded, who work across ethnicity, and who are women who have done phenomenal work. So this is what we have to support to do rebuilding.
Day by day, as their confidence grows, funding skills replace the survival tactics that kept them alive during the war. And as the workshop reaches its conclusion, the class demonstrates a sophisticated understanding of the skills necessary to access the pipeline for international aid. As Sima tends to the last details of instruction, the air of intense concentration that had filled the room for the past week melts away, and on the last day is replaced by excitement and celebration, topped off with chocolate, gifts of jewelry, and many warm thanks.
The gifts are geared for women, because I didn't know that men are going to be with us. So what I'm going to do is they have a choice. If they don't like to have a necklace or an earring, they can have chocolates. That's why I made the chocolate piles for the men.
What had begun as apprehension for Sima has ended with joy, as the strength, uniqueness, and beauty of the old Afghanistan again reveals itself for the women and men. And though a vast international effort is needed to rebuild from the ruins, this first vital step has gone a long way toward restoring the hope and the dreams that all Afghans, men and women, will someday enjoy the blessings of equality and freedom they had been promised during their darkest night.
نوجوان زمرد و غیره
بیشتری ما معدنیات وجود دارد مانند لاجورد زمرد و غیره.
I am honored to be here as your moderator this morning. Women all over the world are trying to rebuild their communities, it seems. And there is much we have to do, but we certainly need to see the stories and hear the words of women who go ahead of us. So it's an honor to meet you. I also wanted to quickly say before I started the questions that these kinds of stories must be told. I have one foot in commercial television. I have my eyes on heaven. I have the other foot in documentary work. And I can tell you that while you make money in commercial television and you don't make money in documentary work, people who do documentary work move on spirit. They move on passion. And you won't hear these stories unless people like Liz Gould and Paul Fitzgerald do their work. So I wanted to thank them both. The format we have this morning is that I'm going to ask the first question, and then the rest is up to you. And I have certainly been to the circle before, and most of you have, and you know that we'll get right to the questions, and Sima will answer them. And my first question, Sima, is during the height of the coalition bombing of Taliban targets, I remember Secretary of State Powell decreeing that once the Taliban fell, the rights of women, I'm quoting now, the rights of women in Afghanistan will not be negotiable. Right now, I understand your constitution is in a draft form, but there is no guarantee that specific protections against discriminatory laws for women will be included. Can you update us on that and then tell us how important it is to have specific protections for women in this new constitution?
We have a new government in Afghanistan, and we are on the path to bringing peace and democracy and justice to the Afghan people. We are happy that we have the opportunity to develop a constitution, and women have been to a certain extent involved in the drafting of the constitution. But we also understand that there have been powerful forces that have been working in the development and in the debates and in the revision development of this draft constitution that are not for women's rights and do not and want to see the gains that women have made not explicitly voiced in the constitution. The constitution, unfortunately, the way it's drafted right now, is not very explicitly addressing the rights of women alongside men. It talks about the citizens of Afghanistan. But we as women need to make sure that our rights are enshrined explicitly in the Constitution, just as our rights were enshrined as equal citizens in the 1964 constitutions. It's talked about as, well, there's a debate that says that, well, it talks about all Afghan citizens, and women are considered, of course, Afghan citizens. Unfortunately, the mentality that exists among the most repressive Afghans who have bought into the Taliban mentality do not even consider Afghan women as citizens. So therefore, we should not be implicitly implying that women have equal rights and our rights, our individual rights are protected. But we have to be very explicitly voicing that concern, and that's what we're fighting for, that we need to make sure that women have equal rights, and it's drafted in such a way that that language delineates that note. And there are certain pieces which some of the women, including the Ministry of Women's Affairs and the several committees, have taken inside Afghanistan, have taken up this issue and have drafted revisions that guarantee and protect women's rights. And we are hoping that we as women, we need support to galvanize our efforts, and we need your support to work, to put pressure on your members in Congress to make sure that we as women are supported, so that we actually have an influence in the debate on December 10, when the Constitution is being debated upon,
Our fear is that warlords are already threatening women who are planning to take a visible role in both the debate and in the constitutional committees. They are being threatened, and women are not feeling safe and secure to come forward and to take a part in both the debate and in the construction of a revised constitution.
Your questions? Yes.
I was interested in your classes to see men there. I was very impressed, but surprised. Are they, this being a very male-oriented society, are they demeaned at all by going to female classes?
No, this is what I mean by exposing the realities of the Afghan people. We have throughout the war in Afghanistan, when REFWID was not able to take its work inside Afghanistan, we were conducting our workshops and our training programs in Pakistan. And the NGO sectors, this is the non-governmental organizations, and it's led by women and men. We offered training to them in Pakistan across the border. And the women have absolutely no problem in working alongside the men. In fact, in Peshawar, which is just across the border for Afghanistan, from Afghanistan, we offered segregated training to the women and men. And the women came to us and said, no, absolutely not. We are accustomed to working together, especially during the Taliban. The women were not visible, and they relied on the men to go out to the markets to conduct their work in the public. And this is the spirit of the Afghan people. They work across gender, across ethnicity, and we just don't have those discriminations among the people. It's the people who have been influenced by outside extremist ideologies, and these are the voices of the people, the very extremes that we hear reflected in the West. But the real Afghan people are not discriminatory. They, as NGO workers, now civil society leaders, they work together alongside the men, and women work alongside the men in our training sessions. Although my organization, REFWID, focuses on women, we also include men in our training because we believe in, especially in the Afghan society, which is a very traditional society, you have to work in the context of working with the members in the society, working with the family. And the women and the men demand it. So we, therefore, are meeting their needs. Thank you for your question.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Could you describe for us what you feel are the realities of the Karzai administration? Mr. Karzai has connections in this country. I understand he has children in this country. And, how do you really feel about his ability to implement the kinds of things you're doing?
We support the new government, and we support the policies of the Karzai government, which we believe are very tolerant. They have to be given an opportunity to work, and I've met with President Karzai and have had the opportunity to work with him and the Karzai family. They're tolerant and democratic-minded Afghans. They need a chance. However, the present government, Karzai's hands are tied because of the situation of the warlords in Afghanistan. He does not, the government really does not have influence outside of Kabul. That's why we as women are advocating very strongly for protection and security of the Afghan people, both in Kabul and outside of Kabul. We need to extend and expand the security forces. So the Afghan people feel safe and secure to come forward and to express their viewpoints, which are moderate viewpoints and tolerant viewpoints. Right now the people are fearful, and they do not feel secure to come forward and participate in the new elections that's coming up and participate in the debates. We have to make sure that there is disarmament, that the warlords are disempowered and the people are given a voice and power so that they support a new government, a democratic government in Afghanistan. We have a long way ahead of us. This is not the end, this is the beginning. And we have a long road and a harsh road ahead of us. That's why we need the support and the vigilance of the international community.
Yes.
Yes, what do you think should be the U.S. role specifically in Afghanistan?
The Afghan people have been constantly pleading with me to take their message and their voice to the U.S. And their priority message is that we want the U.S. to help support us, and the Afghans must be in the driver's seat and help in rebuilding their own country. That you should not abandon Afghanistan, stay involved and informed about the realities of Afghanistan. We need support, we need financial support, we need political support. That is not, we cannot afford to abandon Afghanistan. As we have seen already, our concern is that the Taliban are regrouping and the members of the Al-Qaeda are regrouping in Afghanistan. And we do not want Afghanistan and the Afghan people to be held hostage to extremist forces and terrorist forces. Therefore, the U.S. must be involved in Afghanistan for the long haul. It's taken 24 years to destroy Afghanistan, and we know that there are challenges to rebuilding. It cannot be done overnight. So it is the long-term process, and a will and a commitment to truly bring democracy and peace to the Afghan people must be devised.
Could you elaborate on what you just said to speak more specifically to the status of women and what we as women or as U.S. citizens can do to support your efforts?
Thank you. We have to remain involved and support the efforts of the women, the grassroots community organizers. We firmly believe that a new government, especially a country that is emerging as a war-torn nation, desperately needs its human resources. And women in Afghanistan are close to 67% of the population. It's not only about gender politics that we have to pay attention to the involvement and active participation of women in the reconstruction process. It's simple economics. Writing off 67% of the population where in a country like Afghanistan that has devastated is not sound economics. So we have to rebuild and help support the efforts, the grassroots efforts of the civil society, community, grassroots leaders, because in a new democracy, we need the powerful institutions balanced by powerful civil institutions. Women have to advocate for provisions both in the law and primarily in the Constitution and then in the law to make sure that their rights are protected and guaranteed. And the outside world must remain vigilant, help support these efforts on a sustained long-term effort. The local indigenous NGOs and the grassroots leadership, the women that we work with must be supported. They have done phenomenal work. In the past 24 years, we have not had a government. It has been these women and men who have provided the critically needed human services in their communities, such as health, education, social services, and have conducted the difficult human rights activities. And they have often put their lives at risk, and we have to recognize this cadre of the Afghan society.
Yes.
You talk about demobilizing, and you talk about the issues of drug traffic. Should we have a military presence? Are we to fight it out with the warlords? How do we resolve these issues for those of us who think in peaceful terms, but yet you're dealing with a very militaristic group of extremists?
What the Afghan people would wish and want me to portray in that note is the fact that the U.S. war against terrorism is fought in collaboration with the warlords. The warlords are being armed and aided and abetted to bring down the Al-Qaeda remnants and the Taliban. So therefore, when you're giving more power and more arms and more funding to the warlords, that basically empowers the warlords and gives them more power. Women are telling me that by day, it's these warlords who fight alongside the U.S. forces to bring down Al-Qaeda, and by night they rape and loot and pillage. So that situation, to begin with, has to change in favor of protecting women.
That's where we need to start.
I have two questions. One, has the UN been of any help in getting you some visibility and some support? And secondly, what about launching a grassroots clothing and books, well, they don't speak English, but clothing effort in this country?
To address your last question first, the fact that, yes, there needs to be a linkage, citizen-to-citizen linkage. The Afghan women appreciate that, and when I go to work with them, I also bring stories from the United States that I was in this community, and women do care. And they're extremely inspired to hear that somebody outside, because they feel they're totally abandoned, that you care about them. Now, with regard to the drives, it's the clothing drives and the books drives, it's been very difficult to import things to Afghanistan. Many Afghan groups have been trying to undertake these activities, but the fact of bringing them to Afghanistan has been very, very difficult. So the UN, again, has been doing some good work in Afghanistan, but again, it's the question of resources. The financial resources must be committed to support large-scale development, and development that actually affects the daily lives of the Afghan people. Unfortunately, to date, the large-scale development development programs have been very slow. It's been a slow process, and it's frustrating the Afghan people. And the Afghan people often are not in decision-making, especially in the community. They're not in the driver's seat to rebuild their communities. It's the issue of funding that goes primarily to huge companies and to large international NGOs, which is causing an imbalance among the community-based organizations, because so few of that resources actually going to the Afghan NGOs that are conducting excellent work. These are the obstacles that need to be challenged, and therefore we in the United States have to work very hard to make sure that when foreign aid is appropriate to Afghanistan, that a segment of that aid is earmarked to support women's programs and security issues. We have worked very hard in Washington with the Policy Council of Afghan Women. This is an unprecedented group of Afghan and American counterparts that have recently formed to influence U.S. foreign policy, and we have been successful in working with the Appropriations Committee in the supplemental bill in rebuilding Iraq and Afghanistan. We have been able to designate, influence the Congress to designate $65 million toward Afghan women's efforts. These are kind of efforts that you need to support the funding, the direct assistance, and the long-term assistance. Afghans feel that with Iraq, that much of the attention and the resources have been siphoned away, and we have to realize that it was 9/11 happened because of Afghanistan, because the terrorists were allowed a safe haven in Afghanistan, not in Iraq. These are the realities that we have to take into consideration. Therefore, we must not abandon Afghanistan.
Yes.
Wondering, in the enthusiastic aftermath of the fall of the Taliban, there were a lot of donors' conferences promising a lot of aid and assistance to Afghanistan, and how much of that has actually been delivered, and how much hope is there that what has been promised will be delivered, and how soon?
Thank you for that question. That's basically the heart of what I was saying. To keep our promise to Afghanistan, we need sustained engagement. We need to make sure that the funds that were committed, those funds are not adequate, and much of those funds have not filtered into the government in Afghanistan. The Afghan government civilians, many ministries have not paid their employees, and these funds are not designated appropriately based on the proportion to Afghan women's efforts. We need to make sure that funds are released and funds are committed on a sustained basis to engage the Afghan people in the rebuilding of their own countries. The Afghans are saying we appreciate the efforts of the international community. The fact is that we need to partner with them and work alongside with them, because
when there are other crises in the world, they will up and go to these crises, and we will be left to our own devices. Therefore, we need to work alongside these international NGOs so that our capacities and our strength is rebuilt, so that we can continue the rebuilding of Afghanistan. Diana had a question.
One more? Yes.
Question. Diana?
Diana Rowan, Afghan Women Leaders Connect. And our vision in founding the Connect is to really support the indigenous NGOs. And I find that it is so frustrating that money does go through many foreign NGOs. Can you speak, Sima, to how can we address this? How can we, perhaps through the media, Liz, really point to the importance of stabilizing civil society through the women, I feel, because it is a matter of national security, which always isn't reflected in foreign policy. Yeah. How many good NGOs, you spoke of 100, I support 8, including yourself. How can we get more visibility for these fabulous women and their, their constituency?
Thank you for that question. That's basically the heart of what I've been covering and the heart of my work. It's the Afghan people and it's the empowerment of the Afghan women. And in the case of Afghanistan, as I said, 67% of the Afghan demographics is Afghan women. And many of these NGOs, the non-governmental organizations, are led by women who are doing phenomenal work. And we need to make sure that there is an effort to provide direct assistance and technical assistance, such as the work that you've been doing. We need their voices to be heard, their stories to be told in this country. They are phenomenal leaders. Many of us have not heard about their work and believe that the reconstructing a country, you only focus on large-scale infrastructure development. I mean, that's important when you want to rebuild a devastated country, but ultimately you're rebuilding a country for its people. And its people, the majority in Afghanistan, again, are women. We need to involve women. Women want to play a role. They have already demonstrated that they have committed to rebuilding efforts and peace-building efforts during the whole process of the war. We cannot write them off. The government in Afghanistan cannot alone by themselves provide the daunting services that is required in the Afghan community. Here in the United States, we need to address that imbalance. We need to make sure that there is a cadre of civil society, and this is the hope for Afghanistan. These are the people of Afghanistan who are moderate thinking, democratic thinking, and who are tolerant Afghans. And you need to support them. You need to give the power back to the people, because for too long, the story of Afghanistan has been hijacked by the powerful and brutish political forces and who have been empowered throughout this process. It is now time to give the power back to the people and back to the women. Therefore, we need to start with the highest law of our land by enshrining the rights of women and protect the rights of women. We need to make sure that here in the United States, funds are released, committed, that it is appropriated and earmarked specifically to support the civil society institutions, the NGOs, independent sector, the sector that's independent of the government, but is essential in a new, an open society.
What a powerful statement and a powerful presence. I just have one thought before I turn the program back to Liz, and that is that listening to you and your request, Sima, that the world take another look, I realize what real leadership is. In a book by Joseph Badaracco from Harvard, Leading Quietly, he says that quiet leadership is everyday greatness. It's the long-term struggle, and it's what changes and moves our world. And we're so impressed with that long-term effort that you give us as global citizens, a recognition that we have to act where our feet and our minds are rooted. We have to act locally to be global citizens, and you have shown that to us so powerfully this morning. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Liz, and I know that you have one more
piece of business to do, and thank you. I want to thank you as well, Sima, for your inspiration and your challenges to us. Women are incredibly resourceful at waging peace all over the world. Women and men in their own communities, all they really need is our support, and I think that's what we've learned here today. They have the plans, they have the ideas, they begin at the grassroots. As an example of grassroots and local involvement, Massachusetts Community Support, extending itself to the needs of the local Afghan community, the Winchester, Massachusetts Rotary recently provided a grant to Sima and her organization for one of the NGOs seen in the film, the Educational and Training Center for the Poor Women and Girls of Afghanistan, ECW. And I'm pleased to introduce a representative of the Winchester Rotary, a longtime resident. I think you've already heard his name, local businessman, president of Coco Badakian, Mr. Steve Badakian, who will present this gift right now.
I want to thank you, and I'm so humbled by your efforts. And, you know, we talked about acting locally to have effect internationally. And that's really the story behind Rotary. We are the Winchester Rotary Club. We are part of Rotary International, which is certainly one of the largest organizations in the world that affects the world in so many ways. The Winchester Rotary Club has made a commitment over the years to give 10 or 15% of what we give in grants to international organizations or international causes. What's been important to us is something that we can support, that can be sustained, and most importantly, something that's verifiable. And it's because of really the efforts and the work of Paul Fitzgerald and Liz Gould that we feel so comfortable in giving your organization a check for $2,000.
Oh, thank you very much.